Hello, my dear students. Today's lecture will be about tourism planning and tourism policies in international geography of tourism, because today's lecture will contain introduction of tourism policies and planning. Firstly, secondly, importance of tourism planning and policies in international geography of tourism, how its evaluation of tourism planning and policy was happened, and key components of planning and tourism policy, key like statistics and also international cases will provide it to you during this lecture. The purpose of today's lecture is to provide in-depth understanding of tourism policies and planning, how it's significant to the development of tourist destination or tourist services for fostering like sustainable tourism and sustainable development. The main objective of this lecture is define what is it. Tourism planning and policy explains the importance of them and explore how it will be important in the future, and effective policy and planning, how it will good, and also analyze international cases with some statistics. Firstly, let me explain to you what is it tourism policies and planning. Firstly, tourism policy, it refers to a set of principles, rules, strategies, regulations to understand, to get more tourists, to do properly different impacts like environmental, social, economic. All of them depends on planning. That's why planning and policies go together. It's development of infrastructure, different activities, and also to get long-term and short-term planning. It's very important tourism policies. Key aspects of tourism policy and planning is firstly, framework for sustainable tourism development, because now we should do properly tourist destination as a developing, for example, as a Kazakhstan, framework for tourism development by sustainable development. Secondly, government and stakeholder involvement. It means collaboration, it's important, partnership important in policy and planning, because all stakeholders should engage in planning activities of tourism. Finally, it's balance between economic, environment, and social cultural like aims or purposes. Importance of tourism policy and planning. How it's important? Firstly, economic growth. Economic growth, because tourism policy, it drives investment. Firstly. Secondly, it's create employment. And finally, enhance GDP contributions. Secondly, environmental conservation. It means that planning like guarantee minimal environmental degradations, which means that while we're planning and while we doing our policy, we should consider about environmental impacts. Thirdly, cultural preservation supports the protection of heritage and local tradition and customs, which means everyone have to respect tourists, the locals, and also government. And infrastructure development. Infrastructure development, it means that like while doing policy and planning, we should consider not just like improvement of like hotels or other things. We should consider about infrastructure, roads, accessibility, transportation, and also visitors like experience improvement of. And finally, crisis management. Crisis management is very important, you know that, because crisis, it will be everywhere, depends on man-made or it depends on environmental. That's why crisis management in any policy and any planning, it's very important, because it helps to mitigate different risks and also like over tourism. Evolution of tourism policy and planning, it's we have to know properly, because you know how it will start and nowadays how it will be, how it is going. It's firstly, it's early stage. In early stage evolution of tourism planning and policy, it's firstly tourism began informally with limited of government involvement, because that time they organize it not just like locals but also government, but it's not properly. Secondly, post-war era, that time government started focusing on tourism as an economic way. They are like GDP contribution tourism, and also job creator or job creating employment. And that time I think started the new era for tourism. After that, third era of the development of tourism planning and policy, it was sustainable tourism movement. It means that emphasize shifted and balancing growth and sustainability, which means that sustainable tourism is one of the key aspects of tourism. That's why nowadays it's today's sustainable tourism movement related to contemporary trends or present trends nowadays. And finally, contemporary trends, it's focused not just sustainable tourism, but also for technology and ecotourism, and also accessibility or inclusivity, which is very important for every destination. Key components of tourism policy, let me explain properly, because in this policy components we have to know properly, because like firstly, legislative framework. Legislative framework, it means that law, regulation, or different types of rules which is related with policy of tourism industry or planning of. And secondly, strategic goals. It means that our plan should be divided by short-term and long-term goals, which means that at the beginning it will be short, after that like long-term, to get like for 5 and 10 years our results or outcomes. Thirdly, stakeholder collaboration. It means coordination all like policy or planning by different stakeholders, and also partnership, it's very important in that like component. And finally, monitoring and evaluation, all of them, it's one of the state regulations function. And here final final stage is tools to assess policy effectiveness or successfulness. Planning a strategy for sustainable tourism development, it means that firstly integrated planning, like it means that social economic goals, like not just environment, but here it's very important economic and social. Zoning, it means that designed areas for tourism to avoid over connection. Conservation, like it means that divide properly. And carrying capacity analysis, it means that access limits to minimize environmental impacts. Different environmental impacts will affect our resources. That's why it's really important. Community engagement. Community engagement involves local in decision making or planning or policy of tourism industry, because in developing countries, in different countries, a lot of they ignored the involvement of locals. And finally, applying of technology, because nowadays technology plays very pivotal role of tourism in the development of tourist services and planning and also policies. Let me share with you international cases in tourism policy and planning. One of them is New Zealand, because New Zealand's focus mostly ecotourism, and for them they have enough resources, and from at the beginning they choose as a planning one of the planning part, it's ecotourism. Second, Maldives policies to mitigate climate change impacts, but they are getting some problems, but they are doing very well. They are getting a lot of tourists, but at the end I think they will get some problems with environment. Second, Spain, balancing mass tourism with cultural heritage preservation. And finally, Singapore, they are focus on urban tourism, and they are doing tourist experience very well by smart tourism. All of them related with planning and policy of government. Let me share with you statistics of tourism planning, because firstly it's trends of seasonality, which is influenced by the planning, because one of them important thing in tourism. Secondly, economic contribution, which means that firstly GDP and employment. Thirdly, sustainable metrics, maybe it carbon footprint, it depends on destination ecological situation. And finally, visitor satisfaction survey, it means that insight for improving such some services or tourist experiences. In conclusion, in this lecture, I explained to you properly the policy and planning of tourism, how will affect to the development of tourist destination, and what factors will influence for the planning and policy of government, and how should we organize, for example, preserving culture, saving environment, and also engaging locals. I think today's lecture was helpful and very useful. Today's lecture reference I provided to you, and thank you for your attention. Bye bye.